Welcome to the NBAV podcast. Welcome back to NBAV, the NBA Avenue podcast, where we are continuing our NBA Summer League series. This time, we are going to be talking about the Atlanta Hawks. We're going to go through, at least name every single player. We're going to talk about the players who actually played and the players especially who shined. And let's get straight into it. Of course, at the end of the podcast, we're going to go through our rankings of the top 10 or so NBA Summer League players, not including anyone who got to play legitimate playoff minutes. So Jaime Jaquez, for instance, would not count. Everyone else pretty much counts. And we're going to go through that, and we're going to see if any of the Atlanta Hawks players managed to crack that top 10. Let's start it off straight away by, you know what, first, let's talk about the duality here. You had two players who can basically play the point. You have one guy in Wallace, right? This is Cason Wallace's brother, right? This is Keaton Wallace. So he is 25. He's a little bit more, he's a late bloomer, let's call him, but a similar type player, a fundamental player, a sound player, a consistent player, a reliable guy. He's been out of college for a year, so this is going to be his second year. And he gives you the responsible, good, run the offense, not going to make very many mistakes, can shoot, can do everything you want. He doesn't blow you away with his athleticism, or he doesn't blow you away with his quickness, let's call it. That's probably the better word. He's not flashy. He's sound and fundamental. And then on the other hand, you have Jarkel Joiner, who is a rookie, also 25, undrafted player, and he has a lot more bounce. He's going to attack. If I had to say, this guy brings more to the table of similar start and stop speed, more of like a Dennis Schroeder, which is a little ironic because Schroeder did play for the Atlanta Hawks for a while. But Joiner, I would say, a little bouncier, a little better shooter from three. I would say more of a classic shooter from three, whereas Schroeder kind of has a very slow-looking shot, a very, very light touch shot, whereas Joiner has, I guess, what you'd call a more typical NBA three-point looking shot. So you have these two guys. Joiner is the explosive, entertaining guy, but ultimately, who wins out? It's Wallace. Wallace was too good. He's too good in crunch time, and he was a much bigger difference maker than the exciting Joiner. So there we have that. And then the other point to really look at for the Atlanta Hawks was obviously Zaccharie Risacher, who was the number 1 overall pick. And the way I like to think about things when you're talking about the draft and then Summer League is, once the draft is over, the draft doesn't even matter. If the worst player in the draft has the best Summer League and the 60th overall pick goes out there and dominates everybody, and he's the talk of the town, and he goes on and becomes a great NBA player, it doesn't matter where he got drafted. The only time it really matters is the night that you get drafted. You get drafted 1 overall, and yeah, you'll get a little bit more run. Teams will be a little bit more patient with you. They'll give you more opportunity. But ultimately, it doesn't matter. The fact that you got drafted first can only carry so much weight for so long. And that's kind of what I think about here. When you think of Zaccharie Risacher and you think, if we came into the Summer League and didn't know that he was the number 1 overall pick and you just looked at everyone on equal scale, I don't know if he would blow anyone away. I don't think anyone would look at him and go, this guy is one of the top 10 talents in Summer League. I don't think he's going to make it onto our list. Now, what I like about him is he can go both ways. He could score over both shoulders. He can shoot. But, is there a whole lot separating him from someone like Buzelis? Is there a whole lot? Maybe a little bit. Maybe he's a little bit more calm, a little bit less risky. But is there a whole lot separating them? Is he head and shoulders above other players? Didn't seem that way from the games that we got to see him in, unfortunately. And I think that's the negative for the Atlanta Hawks. Now let's just quickly name the guys who played. You had Robert Baker. He got some time. He hit a bunch of three-pointers. You had Jordan Bowden, who came on late in the last couple of games and hit a bunch of threes and looked pretty solid, but he's 27. So Baker 26, Bowden 27. Kobe Buffkin didn't play. Then you had Nikola Jurisic. He started off with an okay first game and made some plays, and then that was it. Then you had Makhtar Gueye. He was a big part of all of these games, a 27-year-old. So, he's coming from France, and he definitely made his presence felt. Very long and gangly. I would have guessed he's younger than 27, but he's interesting because he can shoot the three, and he's the kind of guy who's basically there just because he's not just able to shoot threes, but he's shooting threes at 6'10", which makes him an interesting prospect. Like if you had him playing similar to I don't know, quite a Mo Bamba, but something like that where you have a guy or like a Chet Holmgren where they can shoot the three as well as play inside. That's sort of the prototype where you're going to want Mohamed Gueye to fit into. Then you have Jarkel Joyner, who we already discussed. He's only 6'1". He's 25-year-old undrafted player out of NC State, and he's got the flash. Ultimately, I don't know if he's gonna be able to make it. The question is, okay, he's not going to be the starting point guard, meaning, of course he's not. They have Trae Young on their team, and then DeJounte Murray's gone. So that opens up a little bit of hope if you're a small guard. In case of a Trae Young injury, maybe then you get an opportunity. But if you're talking about maybe a sixth-man role, would Jarkel Joyner be an option? Would they want to test him out? Or do you just not want to have too many small guards on the team, considering Trae Young is already small? Maybe you want to back him up with a bigger point guard? Or would you say, hey, he can just slot in the Trae Young spot, and we just play the same type of defense and the same type of play style the whole game? You just take Trae Young out for parts of it and you put Joyner in. I don't know what their philosophy would be, which way they would want to go. But ultimately, Joyner is not going to win over Keaton Wallace, if you're talking about who's going to be a backup point guard, but maybe he would win if you're talking about him more as a six-man. Meaning, if you had to say, okay, we need a point guard for the season, Trae Young is out, Keaton Wallace would be a better pick over Jarkel Joyner. But if you just need someone to come off the bench and kind of Lou Williams it, maybe Jarkel Joyner has a shot there. That's kind of the way I look at it right now. Then you had EJ Liddell, who had some really good games. He's a guy who can play sort of a Draymond Green type role because he's tough. He fits the undersized big man the way the league is today, and he can also shoot some threes better than Draymond Green. The question is the passing. He made some good passes. So EJ Liddell, actually a guy who really impressed me in Summer League. Then you had Emmett Matthews Jr., don't remember seeing much of him. Miles Norris came on late. He was pretty good. He was able to shoot threes, had a little bit of start and stop action, played a more of a polished game, but could also get in there on the break and make some plays, offensive rebounds. So he's a little bit more interesting than you would think. Then you had Nico Ongenda, don't remember him. Risa Shea, who we already discussed, who, by the way, is the youngest guy, the 19-year-old. He's the youngest guy on this team. This is an Atlanta team where the young guys were Risa Shea and Buffkin and Jurisic. Then it gets way up there. They have 3 27-year-olds and a couple of 26-year-olds and a couple of 25-year-olds. Like, this is a team that they clearly, more similar to the Knicks, they have a whole array of talent. And they try to mix it with the old and the young and see what they can find. That's why they had so many players contribute. Now, unfortunately, I wouldn't say that that's the best for getting people to really shine, because when you have a whole bunch of guys who just look solid, it's hard for someone to separate themselves from the pack. So it's good for the team, maybe it's good for building something, but it's not necessarily good for the individual unless you can just shine way above everyone. And no one was able to really shine. I guess the guy who shined the most, you probably say, is Wallace, and that he's the next player there. Keaton Wallace, Dylan Windler, who somehow is still trying to find his way into the NBA and stay with the team for a while. He was a first-round pick in 2019, so he's been around for a long time, and it's because he could shoot the three so well. I could see him maybe if he was on the Miami Heat, maybe he could make a living there, but the problem is the Heat already have Duncan Robinson and Cole Swider already playing those three-point shooting roles. So where's Windler going to go? At this point, he's probably just going to be relegated to the G League. And then you have Moses Wood, who also showed some ability here and there on the threes, going to the basket. Another solid guy, a 25-year-old. But looking at all of the big players for them, I guess the players you're going to want to talk about are Risa Shea. You're not going to really want to talk about Windler too much. You're not going to want to talk about Duricic. You'll talk about Wallace for sure. You'll talk about Gay. You'll talk about Liddell and Joyner. Baker, he hit some threes, but ultimately I don't know if he's really gonna make it. Moses Wood, Norris, Bowden, like all of these guys, all these 3-point shooters, like good, but just not really enough to really say that you're gonna make it into the NBA, and not be part of the G League. So the players that we're really gonna focus on right now, it's Risa Shea, Wallace, Mohamed Gay, EJ Liddell, and Jarkel Joyner. Of all the guys, you have to say, unfortunately for Risa Shea, Wallace was the better player than him. Keaton Wallace was the better player in Summer League than Zachary Risa Shea. Now, neither of those guys are going to make it onto our top 10 list. I would, if I had to rank it, I would say we'll still put Risa Shea at the top because he has the most potential. Then we'll put Wallace at 2, who was their actual best player there. And then after that, I'm going to put Liddell because I think his game really translates very nicely to the NBA. Then we'll put Mohamed Gay and then Jarkel Joyner, still having an outside shot, outside looking in. But none of these guys are going to supplant anyone. You can't say that any of the guys on this team, Risa Shea included, looked better than, Khalil Ware, Jet Howard, Tristan Da Silva, Josh Christopher, Tyler Kolek, Cole Swider, Jaden Springer, Nemanja Kita, Johnny Furphy, Jacobitis. They all looked better than Zachary Risa Shea. Even Alondas Williams, who we still have on the list, showed a lot more than Zachary Risa Shea did. So it's just hard where, you have the thing in the back of your mind saying he's the number one pick. He has all this potential. He has some good capability, but it's like at a certain point you kind of need to see it. And if we didn't know that he was the number one overall pick, then none of us would be thinking of him the same way. It's only because we know he was picked first. And that's the thing that we kind of have to try to separate. So there you have it. Atlanta, better than I thought. At least they have some players up and coming, although the players who are the ones who did better in Summer League are sort of their older players, with the exception of Joyner. No, even Joyner, 25-year-old. I mean, these guys are older players, so it's kind of a tempered excitement for Atlanta, and I guess you have to not be too thrilled considering your first overall pick doesn't look that great, and you're going to just have to hope something changes. But that's the Atlanta Hawks. There you have it. And like always, thanks for tuning in for a great time every time. And until next time, we are out.